analytically and factually, climate change exists. It has dramatic impact, and I cited it in my opening in regards to the 100-year storm being much more frequent. When you cite that in August of last year, the average rainfall for the month of August for Newtown and Oxford was 3.2 inches per month. That during that training thunderstorm that we had within a 3-hour period, 14 to 16 inches of rain come down. Climate change is real. That's being said, we definitely need to address it from not only a environmental basis, but a societal as well as an economic basis. However, the challenge is real in the sense that there needs to be a balance. For example, one of the biggest costs in regards to the public benefit is the utilization of Millstone nuclear power plant, which has the best zero carbon emission, but it comes at a cost. The governor made the decision to not undertake a wind contract, which would have been significantly higher, although how important it is for renewable energy. So when we talk about climate change, it needs to be done in concert with the balance of cost to the consumer. And it needs to be done, and it can be done. So for example, I made a recommendation, we all did, to cap buying renewable energies such as hydro, solar, wind, and nuclear possibilities, but cap it instead of having a fixed price that this Millstone contract is costing in the public benefits, to tie it into 150% of the market rate of energy, to give some flexibility of the market rate. So again, I hope I'm able to share with you, absolutely, climate change is real. We have an important role to raise awareness, and I'll share this with you. As you mentioned your family, we have elementary students who are doing their best to do their own part and to educate adults like us to be able to look at waste disposable and recycling. So again, yes, I do support it, but we need to balance it. But let me caveat, ma'am, we need to balance it with the affordability of our taxpayers and consumers.
Very important mission that we have. So that's who I am. But I guess I wanted to get some answers about this Eversource thing. I understand that there was a bill that was bipartisan, but mainly from the Republicans, got some Democrats on it, that allowed Connecticut to go it alone to save Millstone nuclear power plant. And as a result, we saved it, and it was a heroic effort because of all the businesses in the southern part of Fairfield County to try and make sure that they didn't go out of business. But now it's my understanding that our neighbors in Massachusetts are enjoying very low electric rates on our nickel, and that we're paying high rates, but they're kind of skating through and taking advantage of something that we stepped up to do. And what I would like to find out is, what is it that we can do as a state to try and recover or turn the tables on Massachusetts a little bit to make it more fair? I'm not trying to hurt the people up there, but this can't be, where they're using something like 60% of the electricity, we're using much less, and we're paying way more. And that just doesn't seem fair to me. And there must be something, some creative thing that you can do about it. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that I hope the state of Connecticut is following the lead of the federal government and cutting waste, fraud, and abuse wherever it is that you guys are digging deep to look. I know a few people rolled their eyes at the mention of DOGE, but if anybody in this room doesn't think there's waste, fraud, and abuse in government, then you haven't looked very closely. So I don't care what party you're in. That should be something that we all support. And that would help us all, be able to afford it. I have 2 daughters, both of them under 40, both of them trying to start their lives as well. I'm very sensitive to the needs of climate change. But they just need to be able to get through the next couple of years too. And right now, they feel like that's just, the hurdles are so very high. So that's my
Thank
comment,
you.
and I'd like to hear about the Eversource.
Yes. Mitch, we'll let you start. Oh, if you,
There is a ton of waste, and your representatives are on top of the waste, particularly in the Appropriations Committee, and we're fighting on a daily basis to have your tax dollars be used on people and not on things. And it's a continual battle. It's an incremental battle where you don't necessarily see the results that you want to see. But the battle goes on. I personally have found and caught and actually blown the whistle on 4 different fraudulent misappropriations of money in my career. Each of them went unprosecuted. And I frankly am sometimes at a loss as far as what I can do to actually make a government like the one we have do the right thing. So I have nothing to say, because I can't argue with you because I don't agree or I don't disagree with any of the concerns that you are expressing.
Artie?
Thanks. Prior to this job, I worked for the federal government, and there is a lot of fat up there, and they do need to dig deep to try to cut costs. So I encourage them to continue to do what they're doing and just be mindful of the effects of it. But I encourage them. Locally or statewide, we can certainly do that on the committees that we're on, whether it's finance or appropriations. And again, I hate to go back to the political part of it, but you can't just get up there and say, I'm going to fix this today and get it fixed. It doesn't work that way, just so you understand. We're all working at it. We're all working to try to keep costs down, right, and increase benefits to you here in the state. And we will continue to do so. As far as the energy goes, I think the millstone thing happened prior to me. It's not really an excuse. I think we actually need more smaller nuclear involved in the mix here, because did I tell you already about the output from them? I guess not. Okay, if you look at nuclear versus wind versus solar energy, okay, nuclear on average annually, the plants will put out something like 4 million megawatts of energy. So keep the 4 million in mind. We're talking about megawatts here. The wind is like 4,000 megawatts, a difference of 1,000. And the solar is like 4, again dropping down 1,000. So while everything is good, and it's very clever that we're able to use, whether it's the force of water going over a dam, sun coming out of the sky, or the wind blowing by us to get power, nuclear is a very natural thing also. But I think we need to use a little bit more of it to keep costs down, and I would push for that. Again, having said that, we just can't make that happen tomorrow. We can work toward it, and that's what we need to do. We will continue to do that, and you have my word that I will work toward that goal. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Donover, I want to thank you in raising the challenges of small local businesses. We hear about businesses as usually the big multinationals, and I want to acknowledge just your heartfelt thought relating to your employees. That came through in your presentation, and they're very lucky to have you as their advocate. So I think it's important that we address small businesses. Sometimes they get lost in the shuffle because they are truly local and community-based, but they are the engine of our economy, and they're very lucky to have you as their advocate. And there's a challenge. I think we... Well, good. Thank you for sharing that. Now we know. But when you talk about energy, it's very frustrating because we hear the stories about Massachusetts and Rhode Island and how they're eating our lunch, right, and taking advantage of us. I will share with you, Connecticut belongs in ISO New England. New England struggles with their ability to get power inexpensively. Connecticut is a desert in regards to getting access to hydropower, which is readily available in Canada, because we don't have the pipelines to be able to come through. Vermont won't let us have it, all right? We don't have access to the Marcellus Fault of New York and Pennsylvania in regards to increased natural gas access. So we are, in essence, in a desert. And the challenge and the difference is regulatory, and that's why Pure and the argument's so challenging. But we also, to some degree, are handcuffed because nearly 30 years ago, Connecticut decided to deregulate and take all our power companies and say, you don't generate power. So that's not in our control. The reality is Connecticut, along with Massachusetts, all struggle. Then what's the difference? Perhaps it is that regulatory freedom, that regulatory awareness. And that's why I think for us as policymakers, we want to look at public benefit. That there may be essential parts in regards to power purchase agreements as well as home efficiency to reduce usage. That's maybe what we can do. But there's also a lot of other niceties that gets put in that does not go through the transparency and the vetting of the legislature. The proposal we talked about, public benefit, is to remove it from the ratepayers and put it into our appropriation budget, to cite it as a priority. I think that is something we all stood on, but also we need to look at the three other buckets I mentioned earlier. So that's that. In regards to DOGE, I was part of a General Assembly effort when we were in the fiscal budget crisis of Governor Malloy and Governor Rao. And we did create a efficiency, and it was a complete oversight. Certainly not an Elon Musk type of approach, but we did have one literally 10, 12 years ago. And a lot of the recommendations that were unheard of back then were adopted to make our government better. So I simply agree with you that there is an important role to weed out waste, luxuries, and abuse of taxpayer dollars on a federal basis. And I think DOGE is well-intentioned. But I will caveat that the tone and the speed and the lack of respect for the respective agencies and being able to prioritize based upon facts and value added. There are two parts that I'll say publicly that I struggle with because of my homework on that. The USAID, it's been played as a political decision, right? And that they're bad decisions. And there may be some political attitudes that are inconsistent with what the priorities of this administration is. But let us not forget, a significant part of USAID is providing nutrition and formula for children in struggling countries, that without that nutritional supplement, these children could die. You can't make that blanket coverage. When I talked about policy that has a fiscal budget priority and efficiency, but you also need to have a moral compass. So for me, in hearing from one of my constituents who runs a United Nations program that aids in feeding 850 children that could starve without that nutritional supplement because of the dramatic cut overnight, that to me is unacceptable. Another area that I've just spoken out on, another point that I've spoken out on is the decision to cut nearly $4 billion of the National Institute of Health in medical research. That was about indirect charges. But we need to clarify that. Now, indirect charges is an unusual kind of supplement. It doesn't go right into direct research. And it's indirect charges that helps our medical research institutions, schools, and centers of excellence to be able to offset indirect charges. So for staffing, for bookshelves, for printers, and make no mistake about it, being familiar with it, there is a little bit of fluff in that because our medical research uses it to supplement their overall goal in research. So there is a need to look at that indirect charge. But the reality, and I said this publicly, I just wrote in a bipartisan basis as the co-chair in a bipartisan bioscience. We just drafted a letter with the House Democrat chair, Senate Democrat chair, the House Republican chair, and me as the Senate chair, Senate Republican, on a bipartisan basis. We just drafted a letter to the NIH director, to Speaker Johnson, to Majority Senate Leader Thune, and we offered that if you want to make these kind of cost efficiencies, let's do it with a scalpel rather than a Mack truck. And that we need to understand that we're not looking at widgets, we're not looking at cars, we're not looking at space rockets. We are looking at medical research that saves lives. And that is such an important part and differential in when we're looking to make cost efficiencies. So there is efficiencies, we need to find it, but it needs to be done in a thoughtful, process-driven way instead of the chaos that has ensued. The second part in regards to why this funding is critical in medical research beyond saving lives is American exceptionalism in medical research has catapulted innovation that has saved lives. But here's the reality. If you cut the funding, if you cut the rug from underneath these research institutions, our most brilliant researchers have options in this country, in this world. They no longer look to the United States as the go-to only. You're going to have Saudi Arabia. You're going to have China. You're going to have other countries that will open their door with an open pocketbook because they recognize that medical innovation and personalized medicine and successes is going to drive the 22nd century. We can't be short-sighted. And so for me, these are some of the issues that I will, as a Connecticut Senate Republican, will speak out, not by measure of saying no, 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 but by understanding, as I said before, we need to make these cuts in respect for the struggles of people and taxpayer dollars with a scalpel rather than just a big yielding axe. So I'll speak my mind on that, and I think you bring up a point that we need to make these kind of incremental, but in regards to cost efficiency, it can be done when it's thoughtful in the process. And we talked about it bipartisan basis 8 years ago when it was 18-18 in the Senate. We overrode Governor Malloy's budget, and we created the fiscal guardrails that led to the surplus. We had policies in which we didn't have it one way. But unfortunately, post-2018, we've now seen a one-party structure that has not taken the input and ideas of the other 49% portion of the state, and that to me is unfortunate, and it's an injustice to transparency in government. So I went way too long, and I apologize, unless any of my colleagues wanted to add. Thank you for your patience, Madam.
That's okay.
70% of Connecticut's tax revenue, what you see right there, comes from Fairfield County. Newtown is in Fairfield County. 30% of all the tax filers, that's over 530,000 households, pay no income tax. And 49% of Connecticut residents make less than $45,000 per year. We truly have sometimes a misunderstanding. Because I know when I travel out of this state, I tell people I'm from Connecticut. The first thing they say, are your coasts really gold? You live in those big movie star mansions? Right? And also, I'll share this experience from me representing from Fairfield up to Newtown and Fairfield County. Most of our legislators outside of our region thinks that Fairfield County is streets paved with gold. But make no doubt, when you look at that, the disproportionate of funding that revenue side comes from Fairfield County. And for me, that is one of the biggest issues that I take into my heart when I legislate is, where is the fairness and where is the respect that we have for every taxpayer dollar that comes into our state? Now, I'll defer to my colleagues to offer their viewpoint, but I'm also equally concerned about the governor's key phrase for me that has always stuck with me is affordability and opportunity. I agree with that, but how do we make our state affordable when we have rising utility costs? That may take a whole other session. We're talking about property rights of 830G and high-density building. We need to address the issue of climate change, seeing the residual of the storm that occurred in August. We're having 100-year storms every other year. Those are considerations that need to be set. I think the other factor for me, again, I'll repeat, what is Washington's policies going to do to impact the state of Connecticut? And I think it's equally important, our moral responsibility to the rest of the world as well. So I'll leave it on that, and most importantly, after we get done presenting our viewpoints and perspectives, I'd love to hear from all of you. So thank you all for being here. I'll defer to Representative Bonicello.